This has been a really great conference. I wouldn't know this was the first annual, so great job, y'all. Seriously, this is awesome. And so I come to you during the afternoon energy dip when all of you probably want to take a nap, so I'm going to tell stories and show pictures, which should be a pretty good fit, so hopefully it's not too soporific. I'm going to tell a story that's super, super ongoing. Okay, this is not over by any means. This is about building a platform organization through rebranding and realignment. There's a little more than rebranding and realignment in there, but we'll get to that. And I'm super pleased to be here, super humbled to be among a bunch of speakers that I really admire. So this is super nice. So let's go. All right. In this talk, you're going to hear a real-life platform maturity story arc that took place over a period of about 18 months, just 18 months, in a mid-sized enterprise. So I'll tell you the essential strategy behind that story, and I hope that you come out with some takeaways about things that you can do and you know stuff to try at home, basically. So, all right. So first off, a little bit of background on my company and me. I work for Clear. If you're not familiar with us, Clear is a secure identity company. Maybe you recognize us from the airport, or maybe your favorite sports stadium as a way to keep your ID in your wallet and use your biometrics, skip the line. Nice stuff, right? We now also renew and enroll TSA PreCheck memberships, which is a significantly better experience than any of the other vendors, by the way. I don't just say that because I work there. It really is better. And you might also recognize us from our expansion beyond travel venues and our physical footprint into the Home Depot equipment rental experience, LinkedIn identity verification, and Uber rider verification and healthcare, and there's other venues as well where we're serving the function of digitally proofing identities. As for myself, I've been at Clear for 6 years. This is a historical photo from about 5 years ago. I'm a senior engineering manager who started as a DevOps engineer. I became the infrastructure tech lead, eventually the engineering manager of the infrastructure team, and it sort of snowballed from there. So now I'm a manager of managers. I've got 4 teams. The area that I own is broadly developer enablement and cloud infrastructure platform. And you're going to hear a lot more about those teams shortly. And a couple of other things that I do, I own Clear's FinOps program. It's not something that's owned by our finance organization. It's something that we do on the platform side of the shop. And also our post-incident retrospective process. Before joining Clear, I have a platform background in interaction design, and I went to school for linguistics, so I'm like a super human computer interaction nerd, and I think this gives me a lot of natural appreciation for the platform approach in general. So I just want to take a peek at this photo for a sec, because notice this deli counter, right? It says, please take a number. This is very indicative of the kind of baton passing of our old model, right? Open a ticket, please, take a number, and wait. Keep waiting. We'll get to you eventually, right? That's changed a lot. Also, he has googly eyes. Just want to point that out. It's one of the most wonderful things we ever did was put googly eyes everywhere. But that's not what this talk is about. All right. Agenda-wise, I will tell you a very, very condensed version of what I learned from our journey maturing into a platform organization. I only have 30 minutes, so it'll be condensed, but we'll cover this. I'm going to paint you before and after, although, of course, after is a little bit of a misnomer. It's an ongoing story. It better be an ongoing story if you're really owning a platform, because that means you're owning a product, right? It's about continuous improvement. It's an ongoing program, right? Then we'll go over the #1 strategic point, if I had to pick only one, that underlies our whole approach. Then we're going to look at what is our platform model and how does that show up and how we do our work day to day. And I'll close talking about alignment, right? How do we maintain alignment so that our platform approach is actually possible and successful, and how are we able to start making these changes in the first place? Okay. Before and after. All right, in the before times, there was a team called DevOps. I'm sure that's kind of a familiar feeling for some of you, right? This team eventually split off into an infrastructure team and a build and a deploy team. The skill set there was mostly sysadmins who were like, oh, cool, we got infrastructure as code now, we've got some config as code, this is pretty nice, right? And these were the only people who were allowed to have production access. There was a lot of misalignment about individual attitudes about who should own what. A lot of folks thought, well, okay, well, if we give the developers all of these tools, we give them infrastructure as code, they should just like make whatever they want, right? They're technologists, they're engineers, they'll figure it out. It's gonna go fine. And so these teams created a lot of tooling and a lot of capital I infrastructure like DNS or like environments, you know. There wasn't really a true platform model. And developers had a lot of tools. They had lots of tools. They had more tools than we should have ever given them. They were kind of dangerous. And they could work with them, but they didn't really have a lot of support. They didn't have a lot of things to build on. And standards weren't really standard. They were sort of a loose collection of emergent norms that, you know, you'd kind of talk to each other about, sort of maybe figure out, and not so standard, right? So super fun. What's the results? Unsurprisingly, kind of a tangle of inconsistent infrastructure resources, right? Many of our self-service interfaces that were intended for application developers to use had these major gaps in self-service and would require super frustrating, super frequent, tiny handoffs with people who had production access. There's this baton passing, and the little take a number machine comes into play. And what's worse about this is they weren't really sure which of the different teams to go ask for help for certain things, right? So then it became not just a like, okay, I gotta pass it off, but like, wait, who's the right person to pass it off to? And sort of like a ping pong and a pop quiz. It's like very uncomfortable, very frustrating. Overall though, we were able to succeed at our table stakes initiatives, right? We eked it out, squeaking by. But that was happening at this steep opportunity cost, really, right? There was stress, burnout, detective work, and all the changes were difficult to make. So our practice was really mired in this kind of like 1 foot in the stream-aligned world, 1 foot in this aspiration to have a platform organization, but not really a clear vision or understanding of what that would actually look like. So, all right. So what happened in the last year and a half? I'm actually going to quote our CTO, Nick Petty. It's a kind of a lengthy quote, and I can't do a good Nick impression. I'm sorry. So I'm just going to read it. Quote, "When I joined, I would characterize the state of our platform as functional but highly inefficient. Engineering teams were largely doing their own thing, ad hoc, without much notion of platform leverage, standardized practices, or measurable outcomes. The result was a platform that got the job done, but was extremely challenging and costly to maintain and evolve. Things we've invested in heavily in the last 18 months since then include observability, standardized libraries and processes, production management, testability, CI/CD, patch management, optimization of our cloud and SaaS spend, data lake and data governance, and most importantly, an engineering culture of ownership and accountability. The outcomes speak for themselves. Over the course of the last 12 months, we've been able to complete a re-architecture of our core product, front-end, back-end, and hardware, while simultaneously launching 3 new lines of business and substantially improving our baseline metrics and reducing overall spend." It sounds pretty good, right? All right, so that's Nick. And if I had to pick one strategy underlining all of the changes that we made to scale sustainably, it's this one. You have to continually reduce reducible complexity, right? What's in your sphere of influence, right? What can you actually do something about? Why? because it's necessarily going to increase as you scale. And once it starts to get out of hand, it's a perilous state. I'm sure many of you know why, right? The more relationships that are present in the system, the more unpredictable behaviors are going to arise, some really undesirable things can happen, and here's some examples, right? You get more outages, longer outages. You've got these emergent behaviors that are arising. They're not that easy to identify because it's not like some single component that's failing. Also, complex systems are way harder to change. Your velocity is going to go down, right? You have to get a lot of people in the room, more people in the room who proportionally all have less of the full mental model of the whole system in their head. By the way, to varying degrees of accuracy. So that's always fun. And then all of these additional people, this big group of people, are all going to have to talk to each other and communicate. And the more people you have trying to talk to each other about something, the longer this is going to take and the more complexity you get there. Lots of coordination cost. So at the end of the day, that's duplicated efforts, that's slower decision-making, intricacies, bottlenecks, communication coordination costs. Like I said, that get dramatically bigger and bigger and bigger. And I'm sure y'all can supply plenty of other reasons that this is bad. So I want to introduce a term at this stage, and I'll explain why in a second. And it's nice to be among speakers who have been talking about systems thinking and complexity theory, because this fits just great. Socio-technical system. What's a socio-technical system? Your company is an instance of one, right? There's technical systems. We're all commonly familiar with what those are. And then there's this kind of like superorganism that encompasses it, maybe arguably has a symbiotic relationship with it, right? Some organization, some group of people, they've got rules, incentives, varying degrees of knowledge, varying types of skills, different roles, different relationships with one another. And together they're collaborating over this landscape of maybe technical tools, and they collaborate on building, changing, and operating whatever technical system that we're talking about. And ostensibly they're doing all of this in the context of a market and having customers, which makes it spicy and fun. So the reason that I introduced this concept is because I want to underline starkly that calling this a technology story would really be missing the point, right? You'd be ignoring the whole substrate that the technology grows in. And making good technology and doing it at scale is very dependent on setting up the appropriate environment and culture. So you got to think about simplifying complexity, not just in this technical subsystem, but in the broader context of the socio-technical system itself, right? You got to look at the people, how they communicate, how are they incentivized to act, what are their norms and processes, and what are their mental models of the world, what's their information landscape look like day to day. So let's talk about some of the things we've done so far to reduce complexity in our socio-technical system. We're going to focus on our platform ownership model now to demonstrate how we apply this strategy in practice of reducing complexity from multiple angles. And I'm going to touch on providing abstraction from both the self-service platform interface and more at the organizational level, and a little bit on how team branding plays into all of that. So our platform ownership model is actually really simple in essence. The point is, the key idea is that we're providing leverage to everybody else. Everybody else can do their job because we're doing our job. And we're allowing application developers to focus on developing applications, like the name's on the tin, so let's make it match, right? For as much of the time as possible. So a couple of the things that we did to achieve this, we reset our platform teams to match where we had these cross-cutting areas of complexity that were bogging us down, and aligned our functions to support engineering and achieving our technology org goals. And I'm going to talk more about technology org goals a little bit later. We organized our platform team responsibilities so that they were centrally consolidated under the right owners, right? So for example, infrastructure took over all of the Kubernetes clusters, including the ones that the developer experience team were the sole users of. Even though they technically had the skill set and could upgrade Kubernetes clusters, we weren't gonna ask them to do that anymore. We kept getting rid of stuff. I love getting rid of stuff. Some problems really aren't valuable for us to solve, right? Somebody earlier was like, well, just because you can build a developer portal doesn't mean that you should, right? Some problems, they need to be solved, but we don't have to be the ones to do them, right? So we honed our focus and our energy to dial in on what mattered really specifically to clear and offload anything else that we could elsewhere. Responsibility offload, cognitive offload, and just getting rid of stuff, wholesale getting rid of stuff, which, again, I really love. We also created a brand new team, a brand new function that didn't exist before, called Application Platform. And the motivation for this is we found ourselves in this place where a lot of different application development teams had created bespoke Java libraries, right? We're pretty much a Java shop. And these libraries were sort of redundant and in varying states of neglect, and caused a lot of issues with speed of development, staying on top of security vulnerability management, and dependency hell. I'm sure you're all familiar with that fun state of being. And so if we wanted to make any kind of innovation at the application layer, the existing build team and infrastructure team didn't have the expertise to do that kind of thing centrally. Remember, these were the people formerly known as DevOps, right? Those weren't Java developers in our case. So that would have meant that a completely unrealistic situation would have had to happen. All of these application development teams would have had to stop and turn and talk to each other and have like a central meeting and set out time to figure out what they wanted to do together. But that was just insanely impractical in our business and in many other businesses, I'm sure. So now we have dedicated deep Java expertise that is centralized. They focus on how we want to evolve our applications and the broader architecture capabilities of our system. So these concerns get sunlight, right? They get to be handled centrally with dedicated resources who truly have the skill set to give them respect and do honor to them. Lastly, we also created an embedded service reliability function, aka SRE. And that puts subject matter experts exactly where we need throughout our product to support scalability throughout, right? So actually, that's a brand new function, and we're hiring for it, so you can talk to me later. Great. So I want to highlight abstraction now. A lot of us are used to talking about abstraction in the context of like an API contract, or otherwise hiding implementation details in the design of your classes and your functions or whatever. But what about in a socio-technical system? We get a lot of dividends from abstraction in multiple places here, right? We want to reduce cognitive load. That's the name of the game. So first, I want to talk to you about the place where humans meet the technical system directly. So the interface that we provide to our platform and the sort of menu of things, the options that we provide to our developers. So number one, standardization, right? Instead of this sort of cluttered landscape of all sorts of different animals in the zoo, it's all Lego bricks now, right? We've made big strides in standardizing the hell out of everything out there and putting it all behind consistent self-service interfaces. And I'm not gonna lie to you, standardizing is painful and it is a lot of work. We're definitely not done with that. That's gonna take a while. But it's already made a huge difference and paid a lot of dividends across the board for everybody. It is great. Again, getting rid of stuff is awesome. It is so fulfilling. And in support of this standardization effort, we set our intentions and communicated them with everybody else, right? You don't just standardize in a vacuum. That's not gonna work. So we set up a tech radar, and that expresses our varying levels of support for different technologies. And our roadmap has us working to improve our support for the, quote, green technologies and deprecate instances of the, quote, red technologies. So we've got this finite set of well-supported infrastructure services and technologies and platform components that folks can choose from. So what's the right thing to do? It's pretty obvious if you go look at the tech radar. The last thing here about the interface with the platform that I want to highlight is a big emphasis on ergonomic design in the interfaces that we provide, right? If we're going to present something to application developers, the mental model should be simple, it should be predictable, and it should be easy to reason about. You don't need additional specialist knowledge to use it if we've done a good job at it. So, for example, say you need a Postgres database, just give it a name, say where it's supposed to go, which environment it's supposed to go in, and how much does it need to scale? Maybe. The end. What gets spun up for you as a result is the right engine version that everybody uses. It's got all the right configuration parameters that meet our security and our compliance needs. Everything is what everything's supposed to be without you having to know what it's supposed to be. It's magic. So that's coming this quarter, y'all. So get excited. All right. As for the organizational side of abstraction, though, we unified our reactive support layer. One of the issues that we struggled with for so long was this kind of ping pong, right? Application developers weren't really sure which of these nuanced teams could help them with this or that. And honestly, I don't want them to have to know that. Like, I don't want them to have a phone book and look stuff up and figure out which Slack channel to go talk to. That's such a waste of time. It's a waste of their headspace. They need to work on features. They're under pressure. So and worst of all, I think, is that they were getting bounced around from one Slack channel to another, right? They'd go to one Slack channel and say, hey, can you help me with this? And they'd say, no, actually, that's the blah, blah, blah team. And they'd go to the blah, blah, blah team. It was like a dictionary entry that says, see such and such, and then it redirects you to the other one, and you're just caught in this loop. It's terrible. So instead, because we are a Slack-heavy company, and that's okay for us, we consolidated our platform support into this single channel. And now, the leads for platform teams and the on-call engineers for platform teams are checking this channel out and making sure that we're starting threads that include the right SMEs and no more pop quizzes, right? It's getting triaged. It has high visibility. Everything's in one spot. And I gotta say, as an added bonus, as the product owner for this area, this gives me crazy visibility. It's awesome. I get to see all the problems that my customers have in one channel. And I get to watch how we're driving down the volume of requests. Or when something's spiking up and I'm like, oh God, let's reprioritize something and fix that, wow. So it's amazing visibility for me. Of course, like at a certain scale, you might be like, wow, this isn't practical for us because we have this many developers or whatever, but again, we're a mid-sized enterprise, so this is okay for us right now. One element that feeds into organizational abstraction, too, is a little bit of team branding. We renamed our build and deploy team and freshened up their remit, right? It was badly named. It was called BITS, B-I-T-S, which I think stands for Build, Integration, Tooling, and Systems. So first of all, like, I'm not even 100% sure what that stood for. So can you imagine the application developers trying to figure out what they were responsible for? Ugh. Don't be too clever, right? You know, we're talking about microservices named after Game of Thrones characters. Like, that doesn't help anybody. So if it fails to be descriptive and it fails to help achieve goals, maybe you should rename it, right? Naming stuff's hard, we get it, it's computer science, but you can do it. And the name of this, Build Integration, Tooling, and Systems, well, we didn't want to just have a collection of tools and integrations. We had a goal and a remit that application developers could focus on application development. That's the point. So we branded this team, and we realigned their roadmap to focus on what it is their priority is, and made it clear to everybody else what their priorities are. Developer experience. So the team is called Developer Experience. Their roadmap is aligned with ensuring that the development experience is frictionless everywhere that it really ought to be, and frictionful everywhere that it should be. So, for example, you can't promote versions of your software that have vulnerable dependencies to production. It's not allowed. So the team has made a lot of progress and continues to find a lot of impactful areas. So, we're still spinning there. It's pretty fun to see how things improve. So my last bit is on alignment. And for us, I am not gonna lie, getting executive alignment was kind of the easy part, so I don't have magic bullet for you guys. Our CTO was relatively new, about 18 months ago, and he brought on strong leadership for our department is production engineering. And he already came with a platform strategy in mind, so I was really glad to get alignment with the senior leaders that came on. So I got to show the org chart drafts that I had been dutifully working on with my crayons, and found that my new boss was like, yeah, that's a great idea. So we started an application platform team, and we renamed the DevX team, and it was great. But what I can tell you is essential, and we've already touched on how difficult this is, so I'm not gonna pretend like this is easy. But what is essential as an engineering leader in getting alignment is figuring out how to really articulate the so what of the changes that you wanna make. And please don't just say oh, it's tech debt, because if your business leaders and business partners don't understand what that means, and they just hear you say that over and over again, they're gonna be like, the whining technologists again with that tech debt talk, right? You've gotta be able to articulate what it really means for the bottom line or the day-to-day operations. Why is this expensive? Why is this terrible? Why do people keep quitting, right? These kind of things actually matter and have a connection to things that really matter. And, these incentives of money and time and delivery speed are these key drivers in the socio-technical system that you and your technology teams are actually embedded in, and exist to support, right? It's the whole reason you're there, so you can't get around it. You've got to pull those levers. And last bit here, I want to shift perspective on what kind of alignment I'm going to talk about a little bit, because it wasn't just executive alignment that we needed. We needed to get alignment throughout the technology org in order for any of this platform stuff to be received smoothly and to continue to go smoothly. So fortunately, because we did have this executive alignment and our engineering leadership had established these really strong engineering-wide goals, we were able, as the production engineering folks, as the platform folks, just to come to the table and say to the rest of engineering, hey, we're gonna provide you with everything that you need to meet these goals. So our roadmaps, almost 100%, anything that we have that's, quote, user-facing, is in support of them achieving these goals as easily as possible, right? So goals that included reducing change-related incidents, improving observability, becoming amazing at security patching, hygiene, other things, right? We made sure to provide visibility into how we were doing against these goals. So we used an internal developer portal for that, actually Cortex, and created scorecards around the goals themselves if they're easy to directly measure and actually practical to directly measure, or around other engineering excellence behaviors that bolster those goals. and directly reinforce those goals. So there's a big community practice around this too. It's not just visibility that lives in a vacuum, that doesn't work. Every week, every technology organization department gets together and in a weekly business review, and they examine these metrics, how they're tracking against them, along with a bunch of other things. But what this does is it gives them this forum, this nice formal forum to talk about these things with their product partners, their engineering leadership, and maintain a high accountability and have very crisp conversations about trade-offs. Why we're doing this, why we're not doing that. And yeah, that's my story. That's everything I wanted to talk to you guys about. I don't think I have Q&A time, but I have a Q&A slide, so please appreciate it. All right.